I remember the smell of earth, wet and bitter, clinging to my hands as I dug another grave. They laughed, unaware that the holes I carved would one day swallow them whole. 12 times I dug, 12 masters and overseers, every swing of my shovel echoing the chains that bound me. And now, in the dead of night, I hear their voices whispering beneath the soil I till. What I did next would haunt the plantation forever. I was born under the relentless sun of a sprawling plantation in Georgia in 1827. The cotton fields stretched like an endless ocean, the air thick and heavy with the smell of sweat, rot, and the faint sweetness of crushed cotton. My earliest memories were of chains, rusty, biting, cold, pressing against my tiny wrists long before I understood the taste of freedom. My mother would whisper in the dark, her voice trembling with fear and quiet defiance, warning me of the master, the mistress, and the overseers whose cruelty defined every heartbeat of our lives. From dawn to dusk, labor was all I knew. The rooster's crow was not a call to wake, it was a drum signaling suffering. By the time sunlight fell across the fields, I was already bent over, plucking cotton, my fingers raw, my back aching. Overseers moved among us like predators, whips snapping in the air, striking flesh, and leaving marks that burned and throbbed long after the lash had fallen. Obedience was survival, silence a shield. But deep inside, anger smoldered, a fire I dared not show. The mistress watched us from her veranda, calm, distant, her eyes sharp and cold. Her cruelty was quiet but precise, slicing deeper than any whip. She delighted in the fear she inspired, in the way her words could wound as much as the overseer's lash. The master himself rarely deigned to look at us, except when he wanted labor or punishment enforced. Yet it was the overseers who brought the terror to life, men with hands that reveled in pain, eyes that measured weakness and shattered hope. Evenings offered no relief. Our beds were hard floors, the smoke of the hearth mixing with the scent of sweat and earth. I would lie awake, listening to chains clinking somewhere in the night, imagining the prayers of my mother floating quietly into darkness, asking for a freedom that felt impossibly distant. Occasionally, we stole small moments of laughter, a shared crust of bread, a whispered joke, but those sparks vanished with the rising sun, leaving only the weight of our suffering. And then there were the graves. I was made to dig holes for those who had passed, or for the unlucky souls marked by violence. Each shovel thrust was a reminder that the ground beneath me held secrets, terror, and silence. I imagined the day the roles would reverse, when the hands that chained me would be buried in the soil I had turned, when justice would echo in the hollow cries of the earth. These thoughts were dangerous, secret, never to be shared. But even as a boy, the ember of defiance glowed quietly in my chest. Every lash, every sneer, every feast or Christmas gathering where we were invisible fueled it. I watched, I learned, I waited. I became more than a gravedigger. I became a witness, a recorder of cruelty, and quietly, I began to plan. The men and women who saw only the obedient slave in me could never imagine that the very holes I dug would one day become their tombs. The overseer's steps were like thunder across the fields, a warning that pain would follow. Each day, he prowled among us, eyes sharp, whip coiled in his hand like a snake ready to strike. I learned to flinch before the crack of leather, to anticipate the strike that would tear skin and spirit alike. The master looked on, indifferent, while the mistress's laughter floated from the veranda like poison. No feast, no Christmas celebration, no church gathering spared us from the weight of their authority. They watched our misery as if it were entertainment. Chains were never just for labor. They were a language of control, each link a reminder that we belonged to them. I remember the sting on my wrists, the marks that never healed, and the taste of dirt in my mouth when I was thrown to the ground for a mistake I didn't commit. Hunger gnawed at our bellies, but fear was the real master here. The overseer's cruelty was methodical, calculated, designed to break both body and spirit. And yet, in the depths of that terror, I began to see cracks, moments where the arrogance of the masters and the overseers betrayed them, and I filed each detail away like evidence in my mind. One night, as the wind whispered through the trees, I saw him strike a boy younger than me, his screams echoing in the dark fields. I felt a fire rise within me, a raw, furious pulse that demanded action. And yet, I could do nothing, chained by fear, by survival, by the invisible walls that surrounded us. The overseer's tyranny was relentless. He would punish a dozen for the mistake of one, and his eyes always sought the smallest hint of rebellion. But the more he struck, the more I observed, learning his patterns, noting his arrogance, imagining the day when the power would shift. It was during the feast of New Year that the cruelty showed its most twisted face. The masters and their guests dined, laughter spilling over silver trays, wine glinting in the candlelight, while we slaved in silence, serving them, unseen and unheard. I watched the mistress trip a servant for sport, her smile cruel, and the overseer mock a child who dropped a plate. In that moment, something inside me broke, replaced by a cold, calculating rage. The chains of my body were still there, but the chains around my mind had begun to crumble. I began to notice their routines, the hours of rest, the habits, the secrets. Every laugh, every whispered plan above the ground was catalogued, a puzzle waiting to be solved. Each night, as I lay on the cold floor, listening to the distant clinking of chains and the whispers of the wind, I imagined their faces in the holes I dug, the earth swallowing them silently, just as it had swallowed others before. But what I did next would change everything. The moment came quietly, in the stillness of night, when the wind whispered through the trees and the moon cast silver shadows across the plantation. I had been watching, waiting, learning every movement, every weakness, every moment of arrogance the masters and overseers displayed. I knew the rhythm of their lives, the secrets of the house, the paths they took, the hours when no one would see me move. The holes I dug, once just graves for the powerless, now became instruments of justice in my mind. It began with a plan, small at first, almost imperceptible. I observed the overseer laughing too loudly, drinking too much at the New Year feast. The master slept heavy, certain in his invincibility. The mistress, with her cold, calculating smile, thought herself untouchable. Each of them carried the arrogance that would undo them. I watched the servants and field hands, listening to whispered fears and secret hopes, cataloging every detail until I knew exactly how the night would unfold. I remember the first time I touched the soil of their graves, my fingers running along the damp earth I had turned for them countless times before. Each handful of dirt carried the weight of years of suffering, years of chains, lashes, and invisible torment. I imagined the look in their eyes when they would realize the gravedigger they had ignored, humiliated, and beaten had become the architect of their end. The thought sent a chill down my spine, a thrill mixed with terror, but I could not stop. The overseer's routine was predictable. Every night, he would check the barns, his lantern casting long, dancing shadows across the fields. I prepared the first grave carefully, placing it where the earth would swallow him silently, far from prying eyes. I had dug 12 in total, each one a testament to suffering turned into vengeance. And yet, even as I acted, I had to mask every intention with obedience, humility, and fear. One wrong move, and all would be lost, my plan unearthed before it had begun. I waited for the right night, storm clouds rolling in, masking the moonlight, rain softening the earth. The master and mistress had retired, the overseer drunk on wine, careless and cocky. I crept silently, heart hammering against my chest, feeling the chains of years slipping from my mind even as my body still bore the scars of servitude. My hands, calloused from digging graves, worked with precision and quiet fury. Every movement was calculated, every sound suppressed. And then it began, the first step in what I knew would become legend. I do not remember fear in that moment, only the clarity of purpose, the inevitability of what had to be done. The holes I had dug, once a punishment for the dead, became a trap for the living. I imagined their screams, the shock in their eyes, the earth swallowing them whole. But what I did next would shock even me, and the plantation would never be the same again. The night was alive with shadows and whispers, the wind carrying the scent of rain and damp earth. My hands, calloused from years of labor, trembled with anticipation, not fear, but the raw power of long-held fury finally ready to strike. I crept through the fields, the holes I had dug beneath the soft soil waiting silently, like sleeping predators. The moon was hidden behind clouds, giving me cover, yet casting enough light to see the outlines of the overseer's drunken form staggering toward the barn. Every step I took was measured, a quiet drum of vengeance. I thought of the lashes, the mocking laughter, the stolen bread, the chains that had bound me since childhood. They had all believed me powerless. They had all laughed at the gravedigger. Tonight, the earth would repay them. The overseer was the first. He stumbled into the trap with the arrogance of a man who thought he was untouchable. One step too far, and the soil gave way beneath him. The scream that tore from his throat was pure terror, echoing across the fields like the sound of chains breaking. I watched, silent, heart hammering, as the earth claimed him. And in that instant, I felt the chains of my past lift, one by one, in the shadows of their screams. The master and mistress were next. I moved like a shadow through the house, the corridors heavy with the scent of candle wax and arrogance. I could hear their voices, calling for me, unaware that the gravedigger they had tormented for years was now the architect of their doom. I led them carefully, slowly, guiding them over the traps I had prepared, until the earth swallowed them as well. The sound of soil collapsing, of helpless cries, was unbearable and intoxicating all at once. I lit the main house ablaze. Flames roared to life, licking walls, consuming curtains, and cracking windows. Smoke filled the sky, the scent of burning wood in silk mingling with the terror in the air. The overseers who had survived the first traps ran into my carefully chosen paths, only to meet the holes I had dug, the soil hungry, swallowing them as if the plantation itself were alive and furious. Chains clattered as some struggled, screams split the night, and the wind carried the chaos across the fields. I moved from shadow to shadow, a silent reaper among the flames and screams. Every face I had memorized over the years, every act of cruelty they had committed, was repaid tenfold in this night of reckoning. I felt no joy, only the cold satisfaction of justice, the weight of years of suffering finally lifted by the force of vengeance. By the time dawn approached, the plantation was unrecognizable. Smoke curling into the sky, earth freshly turned, 12 masters and overseers buried alive in the holes they once forced me to dig. The chains that had bound me were gone, not just from my wrists, but from my mind, my soul. And yet, even as the first light broke across the fields, a shiver ran down my spine. This night would haunt me forever. And I knew the world would whisper my name in fear and awe. But what happened after this night would change everything. The morning sun rose slowly, golden light spilling across the ruins of the plantation. Smoke curled into the sky, carrying with it the scent of fire, earth, and death. Silence had replaced the chaos of the night, but the echoes of screams lingered in my mind. I moved carefully through the ash-strewn fields, the holes still open, the soil heavy with the weight of the 12 lives it had swallowed. I had expected fear, maybe celebration, but there was only a strange, almost reverent quiet. Neighbors and servants dared not approach. Word of the tragedy spread quickly, whispers carrying the story like wildfire. Some said the gravedigger had gone mad. Others claimed he had become a ghost, an instrument of divine justice. I walked alone, the chains of my past now truly broken. Yet I felt the heavy weight of what I had done pressing on my chest. Each grave I had prepared was a testament to suffering turned into vengeance, and though I was free from the master's cruelty, I was not free from the memory of it. I returned to the barns, now empty, the animals restless and confused, their cries mixing with the distant murmurs of terrified witnesses. The overseers who had survived the traps fled into the woods, their screams swallowed by the wind. I watched them disappear, realizing that fear was now my ally, as it had been my enemy for so many years. The plantation, once a place of oppression, now felt like a graveyard, not just of bodies, but of power itself. The authorities came eventually, men in uniforms with expressions of shock and disbelief. They questioned me, demanded explanations, tried to impose order on chaos. But what could words explain? 12 plantation owners, buried alive, their screams swallowed by the very earth they had commanded. The town was horrified, and yet, secretly, some felt a twisted satisfaction at the downfall of such cruel men. My fate was uncertain. I had escaped the chains of servitude, but now I faced the chains of justice, human justice, cold and unrelenting. I moved through the remnants of my life there, touching the graves, the charred beams of the house, and the silent fields. Each step reminded me of every lash, every insult, every stolen meal and broken hope. The earth had witnessed my fury, the soil had carried my vengeance, and now the world would whisper my story in hushed, fearful tones. Yet, amidst the devastation, I felt a strange calm, the knowledge that justice, at last, had been served. And still, I knew that freedom came at a cost. My body was free, but my mind would forever carry the memories of the screams, the fire, and the terror I had unleashed. I walked into the distance, leaving behind the ashes and the soil, knowing that the plantation would never be the same, and that my name, Solomon, the Gravedigger, would linger in whispers, in fear, in the legend of what one man could do when pushed beyond the limits of human endurance. But the story did not end here. Years have passed since that night, yet the images remain burned into my memory, sharper than any scar on my skin. The holes I dug, the screams that tore through the darkness, the fire consuming the house. It is all with me, as real now as the chains that once bound me. I am free of the masters, free of their lashes, free of their twisted games, yet the freedom carries a weight heavier than any punishment they could have imposed. I walk through the forest now, the soil soft beneath my feet, the wind whispering secrets of the past. Sometimes I can hear faint echoes, chains clinking, laughter turned into terror, voices calling my name from beneath the earth. They haunt me, not with vengeance, but with memory. 12 lives ended by my hands, each one a mirror of the suffering I endured. The plantation is gone, yet its shadow lingers, and so do I, a witness and executor of what desperation can drive a man to do. I have come to understand that revenge is a bitter companion. It tastes sweet at the moment, intoxicating with the illusion of justice, yet afterward, it leaves a hollow ache in your chest. The fire that burned the house also burned a piece of my soul, and the screams of the overseers and masters will echo for as long as I breathe. Each night, I dream of them, the faces of those who once ruled me, now staring up from the soil, eyes wide with disbelief and terror. And I wonder if they ever imagined that the gravedigger, silent and unseen, could hold so much power. Some say I am a hero, a shadow of justice in a world that ignored our suffering. Others call me a monster, a man who exceeded the limits of vengeance. Perhaps I am both. Perhaps the soil itself holds judgment better than any court or man. I did not seek glory. I sought only release from the chains that had strangled me since birth. And in doing so, I became the master of the earth I had once tilled, the arbiter of fate for those who had made my life unbearable. I return sometimes to the places I walked that night, now overgrown, the fires long extinguished. The plantation has become part of the forest, and the wind carries the faintest whispers of those who never imagined that a gravedigger could rise, silently, from the depths of oppression. The ground remembers, the trees remember, and I remember every detail, the weight of the soil, the smell of burning wood, the sound of their terror echoing in the darkness. And so I walk on, carrying memory and silence alike, a man freed in body, but bound forever to the ghosts of justice. If anyone should listen to my story, they may hear the lesson in it. Even the weakest, even the most broken, can become an agent of reckoning when pushed beyond endurance. And though the screams have faded, the earth still whispers my name, Solomon, the gravedigger, buried yet alive in legend, a shadow among shadows. Because some stories never rest. Even now, when the wind stirs the trees and the soil shifts under my feet, I feel their presence, 12 shadows buried beneath the earth I once turned. Their faces, etched into my memory, appear in dreams, twisted in terror, silent pleas echoing across time. The fire that consumed their house may have faded, but its smoke lingers in my thoughts, curling through my mind like a restless spirit. Sometimes I swear I hear the crackle of flames, the whisper of ash, and the clink of chains that no longer bind me. I think of the world outside the plantation, a world that knows nothing of the gravedigger who became an executioner, a witness turned arbiter. I walk through forests and towns now, seeing freedom in every face, tasting air unchained for the first time. And yet, with each breath of liberty, I carry the weight of justice, of vengeance exacted, and of lives taken to balance the scales of suffering. The ground remembers, the wind remembers, and I remember every detail, the smell of earth, the sweat, the screams, the whisper of whispers. Some nights, I return to the old fields, touching the graves with reverent hands, whispering apologies to the ghosts who will never forgive or forget. I tell them I am free, that their cruelty ended, that the plantation lies silent, reclaimed by nature and memory alike. And still, I feel a shiver, a tug at the edge of my soul, reminding me that freedom is never without cost. Perhaps that is why the earth whispers my name, Solomon, the gravedigger, both feared and remembered, a shadow in history, alive in legend, a reminder that even the broken can rise, that silence can hide fury, and that some stories never rest. And as I walk away, leaving the soil to heal, I know this truth. The chains may be gone, the masters buried, but the memory of what we endure and what we unleash will linger far longer than any lifetime. I sometimes wander alone at night, the moon spilling silver across fields that were once mine in fear and toil. The earth beneath my feet feels alive, heavy with secrets, and I sense movement where none exists. Every crackle of a branch, every whisper of wind through the leaves reminds me of the lives that ended beneath my hands. 12 masters and overseers buried alive in the soil I had tilled for years. Their arrogance, their cruelty, their laughter, it all lingers like smoke I cannot breathe away. And yet, I feel no pride, only the weight of memory pressing down. I replay every detail, every sound of chains snapping, every scream, every moment of fire consuming the house, each heartbeat of terror that I orchestrated. I hear the faintest echo of voices from the plantation, as if the wind carries them still, murmuring warnings to the living. People speak of ghosts, but they do not know the ghosts live in memory, in action, in the mind of the one who delivered justice. Sometimes I hear children laughing in the distance, their joy untainted, free in a way I never knew. And I am grateful that some souls escape the chains. But a shadow always crosses that joy, for I remember the sweetness of freedom denied, the hunger, the lashes, the silent prayers of my mother in the dark. I am free, yet bound, alive, yet haunted. I have realized that vengeance, even when righteous, becomes part of you. It does not fade. It whispers, shaping your footsteps, guiding your thoughts, reminding you that the balance of justice always carries a cost. I walk forward, but the plantation, the graves, the screams, they walk with me too. So when the wind rustles the trees, when the soil shifts underfoot, when silence stretches across the fields, I know the truth. Some stories are eternal. Some chains, though broken, leave marks unseen. And some names, like mine, Solomon the Gravedigger, will linger in whispers forever, alive in shadow, alive in fear.